Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Regeneration Podcast. Did you think we ran away? Yeah. No, we were just in a little
I
hike.
thought I ran away for a second there.
Well,
Yeah.
Mike ran away. Mike doesn't return my calls. No, but Mike, where the heck were you?
I don't think it's anything too much more complicated than the big one was that my youngest daughter got married. So we had a lot of visitors. I was working more this summer than previous summers. My garden's out of control. We have other things like just a lot of family events in August. I want to tell our listeners if they want to plan ahead for like 3 or 4 years, which I think most do, is that I'm thinking like next August too. We'll just kind of catch as catch can with things. Maybe like second half of July and August. And I hope people always know we're coming back.
Well, yeah, my publisher disappears at the end of June. He doesn't get back to the office till
Yeah, don't we all need that? What
it's
we'll read is Thomas Traherne poems on feast days. We'll just call it a feast
well,
month.
that's
And
I don't know if you noticed though, Mike. I started on my YouTube channel. Started doing like short videos on poets and stuff.
I think it's great. You did one
And
on
I'm gonna
House
do I'm gonna do
Church.
Thomas Traherne because I don't have
Okay,
one
good.
on Thomas Traherne. I don't do I?
Yeah.
No, I have a couple on Thomas Traherne, so I'll skip him.
He's a real amazing person. Like if you, which you were, in your lifetime, they discovered more Traherne writings. Am I correct?
They
In
have
a
been
dumpster.
storing
In a
them. They didn't
dumpster.
know
Yeah.
in dumpsters and
Yeah. Which is really cool if you had a writer you love so much and they
they
just discovered
actually one of them I think it
more
was in
stuff.
Canada. They were about to burn a bunch of stuff. Somebody had all this junk in his house and they were going to burn it all. And they go, "Hey, this looks kind of interesting." And it was Traherne. It was an undiscovered Traherne manuscript.
Yeah, right.
And that was maybe in the 60s.
Okay. I thought
But
there was even some stuff in the 80s, to be honest
no,
with you.
there might be. I can't remember. I wrote about it. I forgot about it. But
Yeah.
well, his whole career, I mean, nobody knew about him really until the turn of the 19th, 20th century.
He's kind of something like of a forerunner to Christian Romanticism, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Our topic today, Christian Romanticism, and as Mike knows, and as everybody knows, as you might know, I recently wrote a Substack on the Druid Stares Back on Christian Romanticism, which is kind of like one of my return to themes through life.
It is. Give people I read it. Give people the basic thesis of what you're going at in this one.
Um,
I want to talk about the role of church at some point in this. And it's not a
yeah,
divergence. Go ahead.
well, because I write about it in the Submerged Reality.
Hmm.
I it's also there's a section on it in heck's the name of that book, The Heavenly Country, and let me shut this door because my kids are loud. But that was my I'm sorry, my research assistants are loud. This goes back for me. Actually, if you think also about it with Owen Barfield and his
Huge for me. He'll
and
be the
his
central figure in my thinking
his book
on this.
Romanticism Comes of Age, and for him, and I wrote about this is basically, and actually I didn't read his book Romanticism Comes of Age until after I wrote The Submerged Reality, and in The Submerged Reality, I argued, and I'm going to adjust that. I'm going to change my argument here. I argued about the noble failure of Romanticism, which I'm still sticking by that.
Agreed.
But I just don't think it's done. That's where I think I have to modify.
Because it's the only direction still to go, right?
It is the only direction still to go.
Yep. Have you read the book by R.J. Riley called Romantic Religion, which is it's focusing, a really great book. R.J. Riley, Romantic Religion, but it's using the Inklings, but focusing, which none of them do, focus as it has to do on Barfield as kind of the key one, right?
Yes, and I think the Inklings were definitely doing Christian Romanticism for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But so I've been really, especially over the course of the last 4 years when things got so bizarre with
I have no reason to know what you're talking about. Just kidding.
Yeah, don't hit us with another. Don't cancel this one. But this is where I had to rethink my position on Christian Romanticism because part of what I argued in the Submerged Reality is that part of how the romantics, original romantics failed is that they didn't have an institution or tradition in which to ground their hopes.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And so it kind of atrophied, kind of died on the vine because of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, at the time, I thought, and this is actually kind of the thesis of the Submerged Reality, is that sophiology is a kind of Christian romanticism, absolutely.
Right.
And that I thought, and I still think, could offer a way out for the institutional churches, right?
But maybe that's exactly what sophiology is. Not like, it seems like your tone of voice is trying to say maybe it could serve, but maybe it's the real dealio. That's always what was meant to happen.
But then I was blessed in my ponderings and my musings by our guest today, Lindsey Rose.
Such a pretty name. Yeah, Lindsey Rose.
Thank you.
And because I met Lindsay through Twitter, that's where we meet people now.
Yeah.
I can't just bump into people. I have to find them through electronic means. So Lindsay is a thinker, and she actually has the inaugural essay in the forthcoming Jesus the Imagination on the household of things. And the more I found out about Lindsay, the more I liked, and the more I felt we were, in the words of, what's her name? Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
We're kindred spirits.
I didn't know that was an Anne of Green Gables.
Oh yeah. And because also, to quote Anne of Green Gables, Lindsay has scope for imagination. And have you read Anne of Green Gables, Mike?
I have not. My wife has read about 8,000 times.
Yes, because it's worth reading 8,000 times.
And there's all these new versions coming out, right? That push in different directions.
Yeah.
They suck.
They suck.
They really suck. They suck.
But the original one, especially the first book. I mean, when I was teaching college, I was teaching. I don't know why, because I had been a Waldorf teacher. They thought I gave a shit about education. But they asked me to teach a course on how to teach for teachers, because I have done a lot of teacher training in my day. And I made them read Anne of Green Gables, because I told them this is the only teaching manual you need, because Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author, was a school teacher in a little school, just like the school that Anne attends in. And
I've seen enough of the videos and redos to capture what you're saying. Even those don't totally distort the education model there.
And Lucy Montgomery, used Romanticism to teach children of that age, right? Especially middle school kids, because that's where they are. And it's killing, and I think it's killing education, not just education, but humanity. The absolute dearth of imagination and of idealism that used to be there. I mean, I tell my college students, I was kind of a dorky kid, right? So when I started to like girls when I was in 8th or 9th grade, I never thought they should just put out. I had to earn their love. You know what I mean? I felt that I had to write poetry for them or something. And the girls in the class right now, I tell them, they're like, "That's cute, Dr. Martin, but wake up," which is sad, right? And Cale Zeldin, I don't know if you guys know Cale.
Yeah, I see him on the Larry Chat podcast a lot. Yeah.
But Cale, he teaches 9th grade. I mean, he teaches high school, but he teaches Romeo and Juliet to 9th graders. And he said they just don't believe that love is possible anymore.
Oh, totally. I can verify that from thousands of gatherings at colleges. It's not a thing. One person said the idea of selfless love. I was one student in a philosophy club meeting of about 30. The closest way he could get at it of some aspect of love, and I don't think it was just romantic love, but it was, again, if he could re-experience the love of learning a certain video game, right? That was if he had to be nostalgic and wistful and
Heck, man.
remembering love. It would be like, oh, if I could have that falling
I
experience
could
that I
play
had when
Donkey Kong again.
when I was getting into Skyrim. Yeah, it's really crazy.
Yeah.
I was really shocked in that venue.
Shoot me now.
It happened so fast. It was total, this washout.
So anyway, meeting Lindsay for me, her posts on Twitter are just inspiring.
How come I don't follow? I'm gonna follow you now. Go ahead, keep
She's
talking.
cagey, that's why. But Lindsay, in addition to being a fine writer, is really a gifted artist. And what's the name of your Substack? If you have,
By the way, Twitter's called X now, folks.
I know, right? It's so many different symbols we can pull from that.
Yeah.
My Substack, which is still forthcoming, being worked on, is Noetic Fairy Tales.
Noetic Fairy Tale.
I like Noetic Fairy Tale.
And so, you shared with me the beautiful illustration you did with the girl and the fox.
Yeah, it was actually me playing with Martin Shaw's The Fox Wife Dreaming video that he did a few years ago. God, 6 years ago in the BC, or I think he kind of visited at one point, or maybe that was still for his MA program in the UK. But I love Martin Shaw, so that was kind of me playing around with some of that imagery.
I do dig that guy a lot.
Yeah,
I like him so much.
It's beautiful. So and Lindsay is, I'm gonna out her right here, is not a card-carrying member of any of the Christian churches, are you?
Okay, I'm hitting delete on this whole episode.
That's okay.
Cancel.
That's too romantic for me. Yeah.
I'm gonna put the new symbol of Twitter all over the screen.
Right, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
But Lindsay, I think Lindsay's from what I know of Lindsay, and I know a lot, but I always want to know more. Is she has Christian romanticism embossed on her soul. So what does it mean to you, Lindsay? What does this term mean to you?
Tell people about your background too, because I don't really know, Lindsay.
I have gone, I consider myself, like, I've gone seeking through all the churches, all the different denominations. I have visited Protestants. I have gone through, I almost did RCI when I got pregnant with my daughter in 2013. I've listened to Orthodoxy. I have been deeply trying to find a place for my little noetic heart. But my background it's not secular necessarily, but I grew up with a father who was very interested in Eastern philosophy. So I grew up with a lot of like Vedanta and Shaivism and those types of very, very transcendent, monistic, aesthetic kind of qualities. A lot of, not so much Buddhism so much. And I grew up also, I went to like Waldorf preschools and things like that. I've taught in Waldorf schools as well. Wow. Okay. So I came through to Rudolf Steiner probably in my 20s and became very invested in, not so much the theosophical stuff that my grandparents were into, but coming more into the anthroposophical and the idea of the soul and spirit. And that I think Isis Mary Sophia was very transformative for me to read by Steiner when I was, in my early 20s. But yeah, I read too much. I have in the last probably 6-7 years discovered like Neoplatonism, and that actually led me into the Orthodoxy and Catholicism just to see how the Western tradition kind of actually found itself. I'm also a big fan of Peter Kingsley's work.
Oh
yeah.
So Michael, we haven't talked about it. I've read everything many times.
So good.
Yeah.
So like
we got to do a show. Would we ever get him on? He's so esoteric.
Oh my God. I adore his, he's so like, he has gone back to Europe. He was in the US for many years and such, but the first thing I read by him was I Started Waiting to Pierce You.
Yeah, and it's really powerful.
It really arrested me. And just this idea of this, the passing of tradition of transformation of civilization to be reborn in new ages was really like, it felt very
it's very he's not a big fan of Steiner, but Michael, in the story where to pierce you, but he's just saying that again, like the West, this kind of sui generis idea that the West just had the miracle of logic is crazy. Right. It comes from the East, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from mysticism, that the atromanticists that preceded Plato and so forth were these shamans who are buried in the mud. Empedocles and Parmenides, these were just shamans through and through. So it's like logic emanates out of, it's this whole Steinerian thing of original participation gives rise to logic, right? And it's a seminal, but he's coming at it from a different way. He's a pure Jungian. So in that area, he can't get the Steinerian thing.
No, not at all. And I mean, and there are things I love about, that I have contentions with, of course, but like, to answer Michael's question though, Christian romanticism to me is, sociologically speaking, where the noble failure, as he's saying, occurs is that lack of pivot point between the immanent and transcendent. I know they try to do it aesthetically, but they didn't really, for as much as they wanted to embody it, it was very much an intellectual exercise, I feel. I feel like this idea of sociology and Christian romanticism is about the pursuit of the divine for humanity. And so there's a very romantic notion of how to be embodied, how to be that pivot point for, I don't know, the spark in the soul that everyone actually carries and kind of seems to have forgotten about.
Now, you've lost some of our listeners in a great way who heard spark in the soul and said, Gnostic.
Well, yeah, well, speaking, last time we talked, remember we were talking about Terrence Malick with.
Yeah. It wasn't that long ago. It was 2 weeks.
Can you believe it?
2 weeks ago.
It seems like a million years ago. But when we talk now in Terrence Malick's film, the Thin Red Line, for instance, there's a wonderful scene with Sean Penn, who plays a sergeant, and Jim Caviezel, who's a private, who had been AWOL. And Caviezel saying, "I've seen a different world, top. I've seen a different world." And he talks about the spark, right? Because this is Malick's drawing on this idea. And it's not only in Gnosticism, it's also in Jakob Burma. And then Heidegger by way of Burma, even though Heidegger hides it.
It's really there in Thomas Merton too, like the inward seat of the soul.
Yes, it's a noose, right? It's the eye of the soul. It's that illumination of that sacred heart. That's how I intend it.
And
you've been rescued from heresy, Lindsay.
After Caviezel's character dies in that film, Sean Penn's kind of a hard ass sergeant. He's looking at, where they buried him. Where's your spark now? Right. But where the spark is where beauty transcends the dreadful conditions of the world, right? Where there's the splendor, the all things shining that comes through, right?
The glory, right?
Yeah, the glory of the Sophia. And this is what I really see in Lindsay's being and what she writes and what she draws. Is she's attentive to that, which is encouraging to me, so, and the thing is, what did I write? I wrote that Substack on alt Christianity recently.
I saw that. Yeah.
Which is because I think it, and this is where it's romantic, right? This is Romanticism. It's where you stop waiting for somebody else to do something about it. Okay, we'll elect a new government and they'll fix it, right?
No.
Or I'll just go to a different church and I won't have the same. I think this is and this is what, speaking of romantics, this is by the way, I got a lot of shit from somebody this week. What was it about mention, I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was on somebody's comments on YouTube that I did.
If it was from Bodius, you probably didn't.
Because I was talking about Goethe.
Oh, okay.
And he was saying, Goethe, because I used the end of Faust as a very sociological image, right? Which it is.
Yes.
The Mater Gloriosa comes as God's emissary to forgive Faust for everything.
Yeah.
And so does Gretchen, who he treated so horribly. But she forgives him, and it's this, which is, and it's funny because I know Catholic intellectuals, like those pathos neurotics, right? They they are.
Anymore.
They hate that Goethe has Faust be forgiven. He needs to be punished. So they believe in hell. Apparently, they're not universalists, though Goethe was, right?
Yeah.
And it's as Goethe says, right? It's the divine feminine who leads us ever onward. And but so when people say Goethe wasn't a Christian, and I read him, and even if you read, I can't remember, it's the Sorrows of Werther, or it's one of his novels. He's got this whole bit about the creed, but he kind of romanticizes the creed, and I don't mean romanticism like idealizes it. I mean he does what Novalis says. He makes it romantic. He draws out what is romantic in it, which is gorgeous. But the thing is, when he was asked if he were a Christian, Goethe said, "Well, I have a Christianity for my own private use." I totally get that. Because if you think about it, now you guys tell me what you think. I've been thinking about this for the last few days. In fact, yesterday I did a video on my channel about Robert Herrick, the greatest poet because he's the greatest Christian pastor who ever lived. Because in Herrick's poetry, he unlike read George Herbert, and I love George Herbert, but read George Herbert's poetry. It's very doctrinaire, Anglican, Arminian. But Herrick's not. Herrick is he Christian? Is he a folk pagan? Is he is he Christian pagan? Is he a Roman pagan? It's all mixed up. And I think and that's romantic, but I think that the thing is and we live in this age of, and we see this, Mike and Lindsay, with the ortho bros and the tradies who are always ripping on us or me. And
I was gonna say, don't rip on me too much, but I'm not as
it's
public.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm sticking my neck out. Well, it's because I critique them. I got attacked this week. But the point I'm trying to make is, and I think this is true, is that I don't care how much you say you follow this or that, confession to the T. You don't. You don't. Because it's not only not possible, it's inhuman. And there's not room. There's no room for the numinous in that. That's just
say more about that. So you're saying like that, follow the confession, like that these people would claim that they're coloring within every line, but you're just saying they're not.
No, but I think in real life they don't.
Okay, right.
I think if you scratch people who say they do that, they actually you'll go, wow, you're not really consistent there, are you?
Okay, gotcha.
And which is not. And I don't want to call people hypocrites. I'm not trying to call people hypocrites. I'm just saying
it's not even a little.
No, all I'm saying is you don't do that. Nobody does that.
No, it's true. It's true that I think that there's this. I mean, even in the Gospels, it talks about Jesus talking about, you're to a certain point, your prayer life is private. You go in your closet and you do it by yourself. There are rituals that bring community together, and then there's a very, very internal experience that is that mediation of the Christic or the transcendent with yourself. And no one can really borrow or peer into that. So yes, you can follow creeds, you can recite all these things, but how people actually interact with what that meaning is for them is very individual. And so there's like as much as we decry the lack of ecumenism and the fracturing, there is like if we could see the spirit that actually binds everyone in the seeking of, we want to be completed, we want to feel whole. Like perfection isn't like arriving at the perfect way of following this item, but finding wholeness, being complete in our actual experience of God, I think is, the whole idea even of the fallen world is that when it reaches completion, that's its perfection, it's wholeness, not like some idealized beyond, human endeavor.
Yes. And that's what I learned from
Yeah.
Robert Herrick, is that the messiness is part of the structure.
Absolutely.
Has to be.
It's got to be. So it's okay. And that's why I think people make themselves nuts. I seriously mean this, by trying to be too doctrinaire or whatever they're trying. You know what I mean? They get too strict, too austere, and that's what Berdyaev calls false asceticism, right? And they become assholes because they just do, right? Because
I think there's also, like, even in Goethe, though, that in Faust there's that line where the angels say, those who strive with all their might we're allowed to save. I think there is this idea, if you just do it hard enough, I believe hard enough, it will be okay, versus going to live openly versus closed. Right. It's such a lost thing that we've become so closeted, so strict, so the walls are everywhere, that only this way can Christ enter. Only this way
Lindsay,
can
when they say that stuff from Goethe, if they put that in the category, I always kind of reference it saying that, Goethe put on the map the category of striving as like in and of itself good. But unpack that a little bit, because you're saying, is it like the worst being the corruption of the best? That like this striving for this like ortho bro, like, dude, I fasted 5 days in a row versus how do you care? Bam, 6 here, bam.
I think what striving has come to mean is effort versus authenticity.
Okay. So you're good. So, yeah. Say more. Go.
So I think that we are so, and maybe it is kind of the nature of all religions that eventually we get stuck in the letter always. We start performing things versus being things. And so when you say I am a Christian versus, like I do Christianity, I had a rabbi teach me, Hebrew when I was in undergrad still, and he would discuss about, how do you do Jew? How do you do these things?
That's great.
Right, that he said, anytime you enter a movement, you stop moving because it becomes this confined, crystallized state. How can you be in it sounds very, very woo-woo, in the flow of it? But it's more just being receptive, right? It's not being a passive participant. And all Romanticism is about participation of, the human soul, human mind, human heart with both the transcendent and immanent at once. If you can't be in both places, ultimately be receptive to both places, you're going to be tied or torn in two, right? Either somewhere else, very Gnostic, very removed from the body, or you're going to be so grounded that you get into, I love a lot of the pagan folk stuff that's coming back into the mythemes and stuff that's discussion on, the Twitter stage at least, right? But also a lot of them I find are very materialistic. It's very much about genetics and genealogy, and they have the stories, but there's no, it's all about eternal return.
So somebody reads like Norse myth and then they want to prove that they have Norse blood. Is that what you're saying with the genealogy?
No,
stuff?
more that the idea of the gods are the first inheritance of that lineage of peoples.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much different than some of the, I guess the very Orthodox, Jews that consider themselves to be the incarnation of Yahweh in toto, right? So like as a people. So there seems to be the idea of the metaphysics of the gods as being, forces of intelligence, or even how Dionysius discusses this from, moving from the angel or the gods into the angelo and the hierarchies kind of becomes, lost as being, it can't be transcendent because all there really is nature gods and the world here. And so I hope that makes sense.
It does.
Well,
yeah.
So one place, and you were just touching on it there for a second, Lindsay, is and you've been doing some great threads on this, and I think it's connected to this kind of Christian romanticism connected to romantic love.
Yes.
And this is I wrote about this I think it's the longest chapter in the book. In Sophia in Exile, I have a long chapter on marriage, because I think Christianity in general has gotten it wrong from the beginning, just about, or at least not completely right from the beginning. And in Catholic and Orthodox realms, this manifests in, it's the unspoken rule that the celibate state is above the married state, which is
Flyer.
Which is so interesting, because if you actually look at like even the earliest parts of Jesus's ministry, when for one, he tries to escape the cities as fast as possible and the crowds as fast as possible. Where does he go? He goes into the houses and courtyards that are ruled by the feminine world, the hearth, the home, the family. The early Christianity could not have existed if it wasn't for the feminine underground, so to speak, right?
Well,
and that's where the whole idea of the Magdala comes in. Magdalene is that the tower, the patroness of basically, it's not any different than Beatrice leading, Dante up through, to Elysium, is that there's this guardianship of the feminine, of the soul in humans, in man, in culture, that kind of has been lost, through feminism and all kinds of other different, variants. But the original, home of Christianity was the private spaces of the world. It wasn't a public, thing until it became, Roman Catholicism and Constantine. But the earliest ministry parts were in that very, very small cloister of privacy and intimacy that was the feminine realm.
Where have you been hiding Lindsey Rose, Michael Martin? It's pretty wild stuff. Yeah.
So you're saying anonymous on Twitter as much as possible?
Well, all I know is there's a bunch of
I don't
guys
tweet. I'm just on Twitter. I follow you.
There's a bunch of guys right now calling their spiritual fathers. You never told us about this stuff. I think she's lying, right?
Well, one thing I heard, working at the monastery, and I'm hearing, I hope it's a sign of the times, but or maybe I could put it this way: it seems to me that the best priests and the best monks, and even I've got a dear friend who he and his wife weren't able to be blessed with children, but he'll say there's a part of him, and gosh, he seems more mature than me, but he'll say there's a part of him that couldn't grow up, right, without fatherhood or marriage and some of these things. And another distinction, I think it is, and the other one would be for Christian marriage.
Yeah.
I got this from Ivan Illich, instead of, and I think my wife and I both embodied it when we got married. It wasn't this kind of new way of like me looking at somebody and saying like, we will stay together forever. It's this kind of muscle thing, right? It's just another version. Yeah. Illich kind of gave me the phrase that like when you get married, it's kind of just like it's the poetic of the road not taken. I renounce the freedom of divorce. Boom. So that decision is behind me, who I'm married to. And then you get this whole notion, which is equal to maturity, of this notion of moving through life. I'm not far from the home of Christopher Lasch, the great social critic, who said, when you reduce choice to the choice between Coke and Pepsi, Coke today, Pepsi tomorrow, you've robbed choice of its meaning. Meaning, in another sense, you just never develop the idea of choice, that you're moving on from something and you're putting something behind you, right, which is a very mature way of looking at it. This notion kind of coming from, not from theology of the body itself, but from some of that rebirth that people talk about, the body and courtship and all that stuff. It's just this notion that we got more strength to do this thing just by looking at you and saying we will never, ever, ever, ever break up.
And that was interesting. So when
it always cracks me up.
When I was preparing this
strong arm marriage doesn't quite sound like the most appealing things, right?
Yeah. We're Catholic, so it'll never happen. You're
never leaving. And that was actually one of the things that, working with women in college and stuff who had been abused and things like that it was really hard to come into the more trad communities, which I was very I love the artistry. I love sitting in, candlelight mass. I love those experiences, but to come into the nitty gritty of what it meant to be, unless there's adultery, you can't leave a marriage. I go, well, what if he's like hurting her? Like, well, and I literally have heard trad bros on Twitter go, well, she should have known that she's a better guy. I'm like, well, okay, then all the men and all the fathers need to step back into the courtship world and guide their daughters into, knowing how to choose the good godly men. So that has always been one. Yeah.
And that's absurd. Like it's not how things really work.
No, the world of sexes has been crazy. So very messy.
They're messier than that.
Yeah.
But I think your point. Well, I was gonna say when I was prepping that talk on Robert Herrick, one of the things that really jumped out at me this time when I was looking through his poetry, it's how often he celebrates courtship and boys getting with girls, and he's got these long epithalamiums that he writes, to his friends when they're married, and because those are things we're supposed to celebrate, right?
Yes,
because those are all the things, not because that's literally pro-life.
Absolutely. The dating world, and as you guys have both know with the college generations now and how they experience intimacy in the dating world is, I am so glad I didn't grow up now.
Difficult.
But still, the idea of like a courtship was you meet somebody you really like and you get to understand what they are on the interior, because for generations, the idea of physical intimacy was a bonding mechanism. It wasn't brought forward until the intimacy of persons was established. And so it was a way to cement something, not to it. You can, cement yourself to someone who's very, very, very dangerous to you if you're not careful. But the idea of courtship was this beautiful, I think, like very high, it's high school crush kind of like intimacy of who are you as a person? Do you like the same books? Do you like the same ideas? Can we talk forever? If we become, what will our life build from besides just, the physical? And we've become so physical that the idea of romantic love, which is transcendent and intimate, seems an impossibility.
It is.
And that says great things for our idea of God as well. If God can't be intimate with us. I mean, this is what Jesus talks about, and when he refers to, the idea of Adam and Eve and the idea of one flesh, the idea of the church coming back into embodiment is a marriage. So it's not, if you want to go into, the Gnosticism, the idea of pleroma and fullness, the idea of completion is part of that language. Mm-hmm. So marriage is a great a great and romantic love, that unfolding of personhood in collaboration is one of the most beautiful ways to, I think, reflect that. I don't have any problem with monkhood or cloister. I think that the power of the divine in visitation is very, very overwhelming sometimes, and people sometimes need to not be in the outer world to be able to, you know, experience that, and it has its place. And I wish that more people understood that that was a route they could take. They don't have to, you know, we have such a limited idea of what it means to be human or have a vocation in this world. And that's a vocation that still needs to be, you know, enjoyed by those who are called to it, and not feel that they're weirdly called to it either. But this lack of seeing how the bond of bodies and souls in confluence is somehow a-religious or not, or too sexual or too sensual or too body, I think misses the whole point of the incarnation.
Well, yeah, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this week just celebrated the birthday of my wife, but we also celebrated the day before that, the Feast of the Assumption.
Yes.
And there was it was going on the X. You ever heard that song by Ziggy Top? I heard it, I heard it, I heard it on the X. And
I haven't heard that.
it's a good one.
How does that tie into Assumption? I'm missing something.
Okay, no, but on the X,
Okay.
somebody shared something.
Twitter, gotcha.
I call it Twix now. That's how I
Okay,
type.
that's
That's
a
how I
good one,
refer to it.
I like that. I'm gonna call it Twix.
But there was this image of the Virgin, modern looking, icon like, but not really an icon. Certainly not a traditional icon.
Oh, I saw
Her
this.
hair is
Yes.
a little, you know, disheveled, and she's holding the baby, and it's a beautiful image. And on her mantle, there's a Celtic dragon. It's actually from the Book of Kells.
Yeah.
Right, and it's gorgeous. And it's got the four evangelists behind her. It's just a beautiful piece of work. I mean, I think I don't know if it's digitally done or.
It looks like a deviant art. It probably is hand drawn.
It was
It's probably
deviant
AI,
art,
but
yeah.
it's probably not AI, but it probably was
something
done by a
that's kinda-
person
I
using
think I saw
illustration.
it. Yeah.
But it's gorgeous. But
It is gorgeous.
the thing is, the ortho bros lost their shit about it, because
Her hair's too sensual.
They must
What
have
a
been having
Magdalene comment
impure
is that?
thoughts. Yeah.
There's a book out about an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our friend Stephen Clark has written on this, Michael. There was an image of somebody drew an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, a little more real, a little more sensual, and so forth. And then there was a book written about the whole reception of that, and I forget, but it's probably Googleable with just those ideas, but the same type of thing.
And that's, to me, it's you know, because I didn't find that to be a sexualized picture at all.
No, it's a real danger zone, because we have to move in that direction, but people could do it gratuitously and cheaply, I suppose. But I found this one tasteful. Yeah.
But it was tasteful.
I wondered if I found it tasteful or sensual, though, right? So, and again, I think in our time, we're supposed to try and work on that stuff.
But the sensuality,
the
appeal to the senses, right? Which is Lindsay was just talking about. I mean, I think we all, and this is the Romantics had this. I mean, the German and English Romantics had this, where, you know, part of what I think people who are attracted to Orthodoxy or Latin Rite Catholicism, they love the sensuality of the liturgy, the smells and the bells, right, and the chants and the aesthetic experience of it, right? Because it's an experience of beauty.
I think that's mostly just words.
That experience of beauty can translate, and just like as Lindsay said, just the spaces. Bonnie and I, when we first got married, we used to go. There's a place in the Detroit area called Cranbrook, which is very much I can't remember the name of the guy who started it, but who was really inspired by William Morris. And in fact, they have a little museum there, and it's got a lot of William Morris stuff in it, which you're not thinking about that in Detroit, but it's there. But they have a church there too, Christ Church Cranbrook, which is a Episcopalian church, but it's really Gothic revival. It is beautiful, this building. And we would just go and sit there, like even when our older kids were little, we would take them for walks because there's a nice wooded area around there and parks, and we'd go into the church just to sit and soak in the vibes, right? And once in a while, the organist would come in and start practicing for Sunday Mass, and we would just like, this is an experience, right? Well, because we love those spaces, and we love this idea of a sacred space. And you see this also and I wrote about it in the Christian Romanticism piece in Novalis, in his booklet or pamphlet,
Christianity, yeah.
Christendom or Europe, where you could read it as nostalgia for the Middle Ages, for medieval Christianity, right? But the same thing, you can say that the same thing with distributism, which is a kind of hankering for small is beautiful, right? Because we want to have meaningful experiences in those, even our economic exchanges, which we don't have, you know. Go to your shopping cart on Amazon or whatever, right? Not the same thing. As going into a used bookstore and even enjoying that. Don't you love the used bookstore smell?
Oh, that old glue, goodness, yes.
That's the bomb, right?
I have lost many hours of my life in bookshops, that's for
Yes.
sure. Yeah. But no, what you're saying about essential, I think, is so important. And like, even the idea, and the Gothic, especially, and Abbot Sujet, who kind of created that architectural style to actually welcome in God as light that it permeates the physical realm through this like this filtering and this beauty is so wonderful. And I mean, gosh, even listening to you talk, I think about William Blake, and I think about how I actually had a really good professor friend of mine really dive in with me at one point, how Blake talks so much about how it's the body that Christ is healing: sight, vision, ambulatory movement, things that are extraordinarily body. He is healing these things so that the body can be complete, so that it perceives correctly. I mean, it's just, right. I think it's just this idea of as I write in the essay for Jesus of the Imagination, it's this idea of choosing the resplendent and the beauty and the splendid and the spectacle in a divine way versus like the Guinea sun. So.
Mm-hmm. And right, the Guinea sun, and that. So the interesting thing is, I want you to think about this. Is so there seems to me in this romantic and Christian romantic intuition, we can call it.
Yeah.
There's something that you want to hold on to, something special from the past, and you don't want to throw it away.
No.
But you don't want to chain to it either, right? And it's really, if you think about it, it's kind of so we have the past and we revere the past, but we're not slaves to it.
Hopefully not.
Well, hopefully not, right? Because I think when we become slaves to it, then it's like those guys who freaked out about that picture of the Virgin Mary, right? Like, I'm talking to my spiritual father about this right now.
I'm talking to my spiritual father.
Just tone it down.
It's true.
They were.
How do I deal with this? Like, how do I deal with it? Go home and love your wife. It'll be okay.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
I'm having impure thoughts. But the other thing is there's also something coming from the future.
So if
remembering the future, I love this concept.
Right, that's Zazoulis and so forth. But so we could make a distinction here. If the title's kind of Christian Romanticism, we can bring in Jung to a certain extent. Lindsay, this might be where Kingsley has a hang up, but I don't think so the way he talks. But so if we just use Barfield and say, original participation, alienation, final participation, what the Steinerian and the Romantic worldview, I think, gives us is that, and I don't even think we need to bring in reincarnation, for example. We could, but it would be, that their spirit congeals into matter, then through an individuation, that at the incarnation, that it goes back into spirit. Jung, and Teilhard falls to this, that Jung and Teilhard both kind of bought this idea that matter, kind of just turns into spirit. And I think to be truly Christian romantic, and the only way you can let go of that obsession or that not obsession, that love of the past, is when that past, that spirit is recapitulated at a higher level. It's like moving from the first movement of a symphony. Why would you ever let that go? It's so harmonious. But we all know that when they introduce that discord, it's going to be woven into the higher harmony.
Right.
But
but that
Jung is going to fall
through.
short. Teilhard is going to fall short. Yeah. And these are important distinctions, and they probably do bring up the issue of reincarnation,
Yeah, I mean, and as actually a podcast you guys did a few weeks ago with Stephen Clark that also got me really him talking about Steiner.
Wild.
Oh my gosh, I went looking through all of his stuff, just because I was really, really curious and really, I had never heard this part of Steiner's work before ever. And so I went to go hunt, I'm a little research fiend. So I went hunted those down and found R.J. Stewart's work and stuff. And this idea of like the underground and the this is also, I think, where Kingsley is interesting in the idea of Parmenides and Persephone, this idea of the
Sure.
falling and writhing goddess, right? This idea of like, that used to be what kind of was, she was the one that kind of walked you through these worlds. This was her realm, but she also knew how to get out of it come springtime.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of our tradition, I think the idea of bringing back into Christianity, this idea of like the harrowing of hell is a huge thing, and no one really talks about it. They
Right.
go, oh, he did that on the day that he was, not here and everyone was
This is the day
mourning. They
off.
go,
Right.
but what actually happened? What happens in the underworld? And the whole idea of this is actually the Orthodox iconography is great because you have the Vesica Pisces of him leaving hell. This is a very womb-like symbol. The idea of the earth giving back spirit as a transcendent, transfigured self, in a resurrected body. This is a huge, huge, like, I don't know, it sparks all
You're
of my
right that
creativity.
Kingsley is super important on that, because again,
Right.
like these guys, they went into their iatromantic states, buried in mud or whatever. And again, they met the divine feminine who spoke to them in poetry. And again, we have to see logic as coming from poetry. Poetry is original participation,
Absolutely.
in any student who's had me and even my own children, the shorthand is just circle, line, circle, right? The original circle to the line, then the circle and the line interwoven. That's the basic symbol. And
Right.
that's probably the herald under which Christian Romanticism can move forward. Original participation, alienation, final participation.
Right.
It's East, West, and then East, West combined, which my hero, John Kapropawis, would say, the combination of East and West is in Welsh mythology, the African secret. I kind of like that image too.
Yeah.
That the male and the female combined isn't, we still got to figure out, is it androgyny? All these Russians were debating that. Berjayev, those are the great battles of our times. What exactly is that mystery?
Well, so I'll pull from my Eastern side just to discuss this briefly.
Yeah.
When you get into the idea of like Shiva Shakti, which is the ultimate idea of the, combined, people get very involved with this. It's an androgynous thing. It's like, no, it's discussing the fact that the divine and the phenomenal are always intertwined. They're never actually truly separate. But the idea that we think they are, that's the problem. So the idea of Shiva actually means no thingness. It is unmanifest potential. It is the foundation of existence, of beingness itself, fullness itself, right? And you have this idea of that is transcendence entirely. And that's the masculine realm. It is the seeding property of divine cosmos, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The idea of Shakti is manifest phenomena. It is the entire physical cosmos that you can interact with your senses. That and the idea of like Shaivism or Tantra is like, and I'm not talking sexually, but like the idea is that at every moment, the in-breath, out-breath is linked. Alpha and Omega, death and birth, every single moment. And that is the feminine and the masculine combined always. So it's not about being an androgyny where we're actually literally half and half. It's this idea that the sensual love is the power and source of the universe. Mm-hmm. So it's, and not in a dirty way, but in a beautiful way.
Yes, yeah. Precisely. And now you see that in Sufi poetry. You see it in the troubadours who were inspired by Sufi poetry. And you also see it in Michelangelo, right?
Yes.
So if you go, you look at his Madonnas, the Madonna and Child, but then the Pietà. And
yes, absolutely.
The Last Judgment.
The Pietà, Mary is ginormously huge. She's not a human Mary there at all. That is divine feminine holding, cradling the death of God. It's beautiful. And the idea of Mary in Sophiology is being either a Marian tradition or more of a Persephone tradition. Obviously depends on where you're pulling from. I do like also what Mike Sauter was saying, that Peter Kingsley discusses a lot in Catafalque, that, and all the Jungian stuff is that the age for the search of the Grail kind of has come to an end. We have to become the Grail now. We have to become that vessel. We can't go looking externally for it. We have to be it.
Yes.
I don't want to break. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the tragedies of our own cultural moment, right? With so many young people confused about what their gender is, right? Is they're unable to access exactly to see in themselves exactly what we're talking about, and they think surgery is going to help, or some kind of drastic measure will help cure some external thing will cure an inner dysfunction, right?
They've lost the idea of personhood. They're completely exchanging, in my opinion, they're mistaking the what for who.
That's Gnosticism,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
That's the
That's the dirty
rejection of
Gnosticism.
the body.
I think there's some good points to Gnosticism. I
There
tend
is,
to,
I do
there
too,
is.
but that's
but there
the
is,
bad
but
side,
yes,
right?
that's the bad Gnosticism.
I don't think the
That-
point is to like avoid Gnosticism and Pelagianism, which is what Pope Francis's thing in. It's to be
Right.
a Pelagian and a Gnostic at the same time.
Absolutely.
That's gonna be my contribution to theology. Like everybody's trying to like skirt both of them, embrace them both, have
And this is-
knowledge, and yeah.
This is one of the things I've been talking about anyway on Twitter, is that this idea that we think the Christian versus Gnostic schism, even though they kind of are founded out of the same, hopes, basically, right? Is that in both ways, they both deny the body in separate ways, and both are also still seeking that absolute internal divine revelation of intuitive knowing that is the noetic part. They're both actually, and for the most part, gnosis becomes like mind. It becomes, oh, I know all these things, and therefore I'm saved by all these secret things and words I know, but that's not what it is. Gnosis, in terms of not wisdom, Sophia, that is internal knowing. That is the moment where Peter is asked, so who do you think I am? He says, you are the Son of the living God. That's gnosis. That is divine instant revelation.
Yeah. And I'm just going to drop some heresy for y'all right here.
Drop some heresy,
So when I was in graduate school,
we got our own cool also, bros.
We got some old school heresy going on.
Well, I do. Now, this is at my master's program at a Jesuit university, and one of my Jesuit professors, theologian, really brilliant man, Father Justin Kelly. You're talking about the Gospel of St. John. He goes, Michael, that's the most Gnostic text you're going to find.
Right.
It is.
I know, in a good way.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. Don't you think it's analogous what I said about we have to become both? It's somewhat analogous to the Western Church's hang up on good and evil, where the Steiner, worldview places, you have Ahrimanic and you have Luciferic, right? And that's the thing. We're so worrying about, in one generation we're avoiding Gnosticism. I get it, and in a sense, the church is trying to navigate that, but embrace them both. And it's another piece to this final participation thing I think we're talking about. And there's a seminal moment. Remember about 8 weeks ago, Michael, I couldn't shut up about this guy, Gerald Hurd, but he's in his book, The Human Venture. He takes where right after the Islamic invasion of India, there was movements, and you would probably know more about this, Lindsay. There was movements in, what do they call it? What's the buzzword for sexual yoga?
Tantra.
Tantra, right. There's movements in Tantra that were moving towards, there were movements in Tantra. Then the Islamic invasion came down that were moving towards a higher form other than tragedy, humor, like a spiritual humor. And I think of, man is the man who laughs. Or when we talk about early on, this came up for Blake, we have people who, they don't want to give up something. They just can't give up the singularity of this thing called Christianity and Christ. But for Blake, of course, the one thing that you find in Christianity that you just can't find in others is this forgiving others. That was the liturgy for him. This is the bread, this is the wine. I forgive you, you forgive me. But some of these themes have a higher comedy too. And I've only seen it in Gerald Hurd's book. But I think the West is looking for it. And I think when we bring in the feminine, we bring in the body and so forth, there has to be this huge kind of belly laugh that I usually associate with the old show, The A-Team, when somebody might say, or how about when they say God only laughs or the idea of like, I love it when a plan comes together. I remember being in a theology class when Abraham gives birth to Isaac, because I think laughter is only used 3 or 4 times in the Bible. One song in the Abraham and Isaac story, and Isaac, of course, means he laughs. But what is that feeling when he names Isaac?
It's joy.
Yeah.
It's joy. Joy
and
has
also, I love
humor
it when
in
a
it.
plan
It is
comes
light.
together. Yeah,
yes.
right.
It's what my daughter would call. It's so satisfying.
So satisfying.
It's so satisfying. It's joyful. There's lightness in it. It has its completion. But you laugh in joy. It's not like it's a very effervescent experience, right?
Yeah, and that's why you're right, Michael. It's important. It was Sarah who laughed, But we need the humor piece. I just think is not there. That's when we were into the Reno Laurie, who is just so brilliant that I still can't say it enough. That like A Hidden Life with Terrence Malick versus Charlie Chaplin. There's something about this technocratic age that we're all fighting. I think we're fighting it by bringing Gnosticism and Pelagianism together. But this humor, this bubbling up humor, which is very feminine, is going to have to be part of it, or we're done.
Absolutely. And even you discussing Lucifer and Armin, Lucifer, Steiner will say Lucifer very much loves the good old days. He loves to think about all the things that were so golden and ornate, that was the past, that can no longer be touched. It's nostalgia. It's that pain of something that we no longer can have. And Ahriman kind of is, and the Satanic in general, tends to push you into the future too fast. It outsteps you, and the technocracy definitely is an outstep, right? So, by this idea of Steiner talking about the Christ impulse as being the balance point, that's where growth is.
And that is precisely where Christian Romanticism becomes a vital thing again, because we go back to the original Romantics in the 18th century, 19th century. They were responding to the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, right?
Yes. And they kind of, to this, when you watch even the whole movement of the Romantics, and how when that failed, you kind of come into this idea of psychology, and you get into Jung and Freud and all other, possible mess that has led to. Because basically it's like taking all the gods and stuffing them inside your psyche, and there's no longer a way to, what's so funny about Jung and discussing the idea of the collective unconscious is that's basically the soup of the physical world, where everyone's projections get, dealt with unconsciously, because we've kind of internalized all these gods. We've removed the enchantment from the world. We now are struggling with it inside ourselves, because we're actually too small to carry it all. We're supposed to share it with each other, and that's been lost, I think, in a lot of the greater rituals. And I think it's also part of like why the best parts of church are, say, the liturgy, those most transcendent, where we're in collaboration with the divine in presence together. But it's also something that joyful bit might be missing.
Well, and that's, I mean, unfortunately, even in the Anglican cycle of scripture, and this is what you don't see in Thomas Traherne, is this, as Monty Python makes fun of it in the Holy Grail, right? When God appears to the knights, and they all, "Oh, forgive us, we are so bad." He goes, "Oh, stop groveling. I'm so tired of you." Right?
I love it.
Every time I appear, it's, "Forgive me for this. I'm sorry for that. Stop it." So it can be a drag, right? And this is what I think, kind of going forward, and this is and you see this, in kind of the weirdest places, two places to see it: D.H. Lawrence and Kenneth Rexroth, who both wanted to redeem sexual relationship, and they wanted to make it sacred again,
a sacrament, as it should be.
And that's what they wanted to, but they both, in fact, Kenneth Rexroth was practicing Catholic to the day he died. But he's a pretty radical thinker nevertheless. And D.H. Lawrence had this, I would call it, pretty profound attraction for Christianity, though he rejected the institutional norms. But they knew that this was the centerpiece, and we talked about Jung earlier, right? And Jung also, his intuition was right on the money with the idea of the animus and the anima, right?
Yeah.
That this is what's missing, and this is why Jung got so excited in the 1950s when the Catholic Church proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, right? Is that all right? Now we're moving toward integration. This is a good thing.
It's a good move.
And then they backed off. Just to make friends with the Protestants after Vatican II. But
you have a lot of people listening, Michael, who would say that we have integrated the sensual now through the theology of the body. But my main contention with that too, and in favor of what you're saying, D.H. Lawrence and Rexroth and others, and it's not, one aspect of it is the humor piece again, right? I've mentioned my love for this guy, Stephen Vizenchi, who died a couple of years ago, a great novelist. And he wrote this Penguin modern classic in praise of older women. And it was about the life of a philanderer. And it was just brilliant, totally brilliant. A work of genius. It's been translated into like 23 languages. But he caught the humor in the whole thing, right? And theology of the body doesn't quite often bring that part in. But I was just bringing that up to say a lot of people have said the Catholic Church or whatever, we're right there on all this stuff, Mike. We caught up with you with theology of the body.
Well, it's because it's difficult to be lectured about sexuality from lifelong celibates, right? I mean,
I always wondered about that.
Theory,
How do you go to a spiritual father and say, "I'm having problems with my marriage," and they've never experienced it themselves?
I know. Which
is that's heretical to say.
It's by definition ideology at that point. It's ideology. Yeah.
it's theory versus practice, right?
Yeah, ideology.
Which is academia in a nutshell.
It is.
Prioritizing the theoretical over the practical. The person who that's why Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is good, right? It begins with fixing a motorcycle. It doesn't begin with ideas about fixing a motorcycle.
Yeah, I have a theory for fixing motorcycles.
Yeah.
Actually try to fix it.
I have an idea. Let's see how it goes.
I mean, so this is all. I mean, so let's go back. We got sidetracked. So you have on the one side the tradition, right? Which the Romantics, present and past, have, and there's a pull for this kind of aesthetic tradition, and liturgical tradition, as well as, and I think you see it in, even though it's so intellectualized in the attraction that a lot of educational in educational quarters for like a classical education, for instance, right? That's a kind of romanticism, right? There's a hankering for something we have lost, right?
Yeah, but it still isn't it.
But it's not making it, right?
It doesn't go far enough, because I feel like, and this is something that Steiner was really aware of, is like, I love the classical schools for a lot of reasons, but they don't really include the art piece much, or the poetry piece much, in terms of the students themselves. Yeah, they might learn how to write a sonnet because they're learning iambic pentameter, but the idea of being in communion with the muse, or with Sophia, or with, heaven forbid, God himself, this is not something that is the idea of like transmission when it comes to Christian romanticism. Is like, you have to take that living thread, and that's what you're passing forward, but it has to be in a place where it can grow. If tradition becomes stagnant, it's not really helping you much. And this is not me saying like, oh, we need to completely speak to the times and be, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm talking about the living thread that is, even what Evelyn Underhill, if Christianity is going to survive, it has to find its mystic heart. It has to be able to grow still. And I feel that if we, in this age of technocracy, if we can't find our spirit in our bodies anymore, we're going to be in trouble.
We are in trouble.
We're going to be in trouble. Understatement of the day.
And
we're so in trouble. We're so in trouble already.
We're so in trouble. Yeah. And people don't even recognize, don't recognize this loss of like, as much as we discuss the idea of, the Gnostics deny the body, there's also the idea of death to the world and transcend the world, and we'll get our reward in heaven. It's like, if I read the Bible correctly, heaven comes down here.
Yeah,
right.
We're supposed to bring it here, which is the whole idea of the incarnation, is that anchoring of that wondrous divinity in the here and now. Yeah. That's the new world. That's where
William Blake is the strongest.
Exactly.
Strongest.
But we don't hear about that.
He doesn't even have any nostalgia for the other.
Thank you for saying
He's always on point on that one.
Right. So this idea that this abnegation of duty that we kind of are stuck with, it'll get better in heaven, God will fix it. It's like, God put us here to fix it. We hear about, that why does God, and this is even speaking to myself and my issues with loss and stuff in my own life, is like, well, why does God allow these things? Well, God goes, well, why do you allow these things? You're there. Why don't you fix it? Get together, stand up. Let's do something about it.
Where we can have compassion for people on this one is like, again, with the notion of the evolution of consciousness.
Yes.
Sometimes I blame people. And it's not like, I'm not saying the three of us have evolved consciousness, far from it.
No.
But it is new. It is new. If you read Catholic history books, we got to say there's things that are changing. Right now, students have come up to me and said, Sauter, like, you're always using this phrase like 2,000 years after the incarnation, like there's some change. I'm like, I swear to God, there's got to be a change or I'm out of this game. But it's like preaching that puts that into place. That was, the evolution, not the change. But the evolution of consciousness is that there are human obligations now that we have the power to do. Jesus said you'll be able to move mountains and so forth.
Yeah, and this is actually, it kind of happened much faster than I anticipated. But when I wrote Transfiguration, and the last chapter is Sophia and Armin, right?
I still think it's a very important chapter that should be kind of published standalone.
Well, and that was the reason being, I saw what the problem was going to be. I just didn't realize it was going to happen in 2 years. You know what I mean?
Just in your face,
it just got there a little quicker.
You were prophetic, Michael. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, I think what And this is like Lindsay was saying. Well, what are you going to do, right? So, well, like ever see that movie? What's it called? The Untouchables.
Great.
When Sean Connery's character gets shot and he's dying, he says, "What are you prepared to do?" You can't do, right? And I think that's the terrifying thing for a lot of people right now. Because
Yes.
we want to let the spiritual father tell us what to do, or we want to, or the Pope or the patriarch, or some
I think we're
authority tell
discerning.
us what to do.
I would draw Venn diagrams and say, like, right now for myself, we had that father at Dillon on about monasticism. He's a great church historian, and he and I talk a lot. But he likes the fact that it's not exactly a Venn diagram, but if we're in one of like Chesterton's 5 deaths of the faith, 6 or 7, that is the next thing being born. Is it going to be born recognizably within the confines of what we kind of know as the church now? Is it going to be in a hinterland, a liminal space, or is it going to be outside? What I do is I'm just kind of looking for seeds and all those, because I don't see a pure lesson from history that we know definitively. But right now I've got a foot in all camps. But not out of fear. Not out of fear. It's just history has kept me with a foot in all camps.
Good.
And on
it's
a
a good
day
place
by
to
day
be.
basis.
Yeah.
Well, that's why
Your last article, you're camping out here.
catacombs, right?
Yeah.
The catacombs, but also the Celtic Church is a kind of a
Yes.
model for me, because they're outside
Yeah.
but still connected.
But how about this model? Like when we say like the Catholic Church baptized old pagan shrines, we went there and we baptized them. Quite often we filled up the springs, right? But that was, you were reading R.J. Stewart, Lindsay, and this whole underworld thing.
Yes.
So the point is, like, we could talk about metaphors of lateralism. Is it going to be here, here, or here?
Right.
But we baptize. Now we got to unclog the springs and all those things. That's the repaganization that Chesterton's talking about. That's an emphasis on the divine feminine. And that's bottom up. People maybe within, I don't know though, within an institutional church, could be Methodism, but from the bottom up, just being done with one element. So there's a vertical thing and kind of the horizontal one. And
Yes.
I've got to camp in all those places too.
I've got fires everywhere.
Yeah.
But no, it's true. It's because the idea of that penetration of of the vertical arm of the cross, right? It has to penetrate into the depths of the deep that we don't really want to see, the underground of everything, or the underworlds, right? And it's also this idea. I mean, this is something that Michael and I have talked about a lot as well, is this idea of like the idea of the Fisher King, the idea of asking the right questions. What does it mean to ask the right questions right now? What does it mean to be a gardener of paradise again? What is it? Mary Magdalene mistakes Jesus for a gardener. We have all these parables of sowing seeds in the right kinds of soil, and sometimes the seed falls between the cracks, into the interstitial realms, into the gaps, but that's the one that breaks through the concrete. It just depends on where's the good soil right now.
Right. Well, that's speaking of the Fisher King, one of my favorite stories.
Me too.
I can't remember if this is something I came up with a long time ago, or somebody else came up with it.
Let's say you came up with
it. But
so you just take credit.
It doesn't matter. But that the Fisher King is actually, in the original context, is a metaphor for the church.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's really well.
But it has lost its way, right? And that needs to be.
The well maidens have all been raped and discarded, right? And this idea of the land has been lost because there's been a large erasure of the feminine. The feminine largely has been considered, we're the sensual ones, we're the left-hand path, we're the ones that we're chaos, and we are. But that's the whole point why you have Apollo wrestling with Python. It's the idea of the bringing to bear, or not to tame, to lose wildness, but to cultivate. It's a completely different thing. And right now we have this idea we have to destroy one or the other to arrive at some kind of new adventure, and that's not really what will work, I don't think.
But look in the Grail stories. Who takes care of the Grail but the women, right?
The women, yeah.
The women, and it's the men who are maimed.
Michael, we
and usually in intimate places, right? This idea of fecundity and fertility. But also the father principle. You cannot be a father if you do not have children. If you have no fertility, how do you have progeny? Imagine, as the imagination works as well. If you have nothing seeding in, whether it's by the muse or the inner, all of this language we have, even with Boethius and philosophy, we have this idea of this interaction always with something that is feminine, something that is masculine, that brings forth life. It's the kind of sacred little, secret haha of the physical Trinity, that it's man, woman, child. Life comes from the combination of two. If you excise one, what do you have?
Right.
Didn't
Then you
Stephen
have-
Clark
yeah,
point
then
out
you
the
have-
fact that we don't have any, the whole history of the Western Catholic Church is just like, the seed's thrown, boom, but like the forces that bring it to fructification, so forth. We don't even have language for those mysteries.
Well, to answer Lindsay's question, what do you have? I mean, and this is coming down the pipe, right? The artificial womb, right?
Oh, yes.
We've denatured sex. We're at least
It's
we're
the
trying to.
artificial Mary, it's the artificial virgin. It's
That's
really
right.
kind of scary. Yeah.
And that
Blow up doll,
is
man.
that-
It's treacherous. Oh my goodness, yes.
and I think so that is, I mean, you can even see with that image of the Grail, which is so attractive to the pre-Raphaelites as well, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Who were late blooming romantics, right?
Absolutely.
Which leads to Yeats, who is also a blooming romantic,
Yes.
right? And these are the things that the great poets, great artists are trying to recapture is really the wrong word, but they're trying to, like, again, I'm going to say it again, this connection to both the past and the future.
Yeah.
Right. And how do we do that? And I think that's and like, I think, who was it that said it? Hans Kung, was he the one that said the Christianity of the future will be mystical or won't exist at all?
No, that's Karl Rahner.
Karl Rahner.
Yeah.
And but that's true. That's absolutely true. But the as you know, the history of the church, who's in contention all the time are the mystics and the theologians.
And Barfield wants to contribute to that kind of, the church will be mystical or it'll be nothing. In this book, Romantic Christianity, you have you got Williams doing his own thing, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, but it would be Barfield who's really kind of staking his flag on the fact that the mystics are going to be kind of poets at that point, right? Because to Lindsay's point about like heaven just being so out there, we can have the word mystic, I suppose, but right now it's all kind of ethereal, just like the word heaven. That we could say the church will be poetic, or it'll be nothing.
Mute.
Yeah, and so what we need is like cultivation practices. But when we say
Yes.
mystic, everybody just wants this light to be, and they're a mystic.
But here's-
And I think there is good critique about that. I think, and as someone who's had mystical experiences in my life before, there is, I think, a logical suspicion is that eventually some people only chase the mystical experience like a high.
Right.
And I think that is dangerous, because there are other, some of the saints even had, one massive encounter. It never
Right.
happened ever again. So you're gonna stop living your life because you're, longing for this one instance. Life continues, keep going. So I think
Right.
there is, I think the mystical as unmediated experience, I think, is really important in Christianity. And I think that Meister Eckhart and Teresa of Avila are really, really, the ecstasy of that interaction, I think, is poignant. And I think it gets lost sometimes, but I also understand their suspicion of, don't get too lost in the transcendent because we need you here. If you get, this happens even in the Eastern traditions, you have these sadhus who can't function because they're so, somewhere else, that they're no longer truly embodied. The whole point of the Christian story is that we incarnate here to bring spirit heaven here. So,
and I think, to move back a little bit, if we talk about the problem, and this is, I
sorry if I'm pushing the envelope.
I've certainly seen this in the last 4 years. The major problem Christianity writ large is facing right now, institutional Christianity, is that, like the Fisher King, it is impotent.
Yes.
Right. And it need and that's what
it need not be.
It need not be, but it is, right? And this is why I think the intuition of Novalis and of Goethe was spot on. That it's the divine feminine that will lead us ever onward. And I think, and I've been going on about this for a while now, but that's the importance of Sophia.
Let me bring up for a few minutes then this distinction. As I was reading your article, and everybody should read it, Michael's on Christian Romanticism, and I don't claim to be trying to like muck up the gears, but quite often the Catholic Church, the church is seen, it's a very Marian image, and we're talking about the divine feminine, and you have people like this great Protestant theologian, Peter Leithart. It's implied in Bill Kavanaugh's work we had on a couple of weeks ago. But some people could say against Christianity for the church, that just as we don't see heaven, in the Gospels as much, we got some reference to a place with a mansion with many rooms, and so that's about it. But we don't see Christianity talked about. We knew that people belonged to an ecclesia. Now, for William Blake, I was kind of researching this question prior to this, so I was thinking of it when reading your article, Mike. And I'm not talking about just the Roman Catholic Church, but young people. We can all use that as a touchstone. We were talking about the absence of love, but we know they're leading with this desire for real, authentic community too, and the language of Christianity and ex-Christianity, whether it's Novalis or you or anybody else, it's not problematic. But I know we're going to gain something by talking about the church too. So for William Blake, the church was all those people. He'll say, I think this is Northrop Frye on William Blake. He didn't condemn Pilate, but he did condemn the barren fig tree, right? So for William Blake, we have to, when we're thinking about him, it's all like, are you creative? Are you a visionary? And so the church for him is what I would call circle two. It's that final movement of the symphony. When Lila or Lindsay and all her Lindsay-ness and Michael and all his Michael-ness, we feel a higher oneness that makes the womb almost seem alienating, right? So we're yearning for that. But what is the church here today? Because the language of Christianity usually does, in the history of the church, lead to sectarianism. But how would you guys bring discourse of the church into what you're thinking?
Well,
Lindsay's punting.
The original
Lindsay,
subtitle.
first time you punted all day.
The original
I'm
subtitle
considering
of-
it's I don't have the history of experience in the church, and as the two of you do, I've been very much an outsider going. This has been my thing, is like, if it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, why isn't it working?
Because we're not in it. It gets back to your idea of what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? Right. We're not in it. So it's
I don't know
like,
if it's not working if we're not in it. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that
go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
This begs the question of what do you mean by the church, right?
True.
And
that's a good point too.
And
what is the church?
That's what I'm saying. Blake's is not the traditional Catholic notion of the church. Blake,
no.
he is, in moving this way, he's a Christian romantic. He's not saying it's this thing where you take the sacraments. It's all these visionaries and creative artists it's that oneness they find in creating a culture. When Mike Martin is doing his jam and somebody else weaves in Lindsay's nice rock, her bass.
My nice rock ballads.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for Blake, though, the idea of perceiving the world in a new way is paramount. It's not because yes, he does harp on the importance of visionaries, but it's the fact that visionaries have a way of seeing that others don't see. And I think that's kind of like, even Christ kind of, wailed on his disciples. Can't you? And they got to, they're afraid. It's like, don't you see yet? Can't you perceive what I'm talking about yet? Right. And they're kind of just that they even at the cross they disperse. Mm-hmm. Who's there left? John and the women.
Mm-hmm. Well, a few weeks ago I was in Washington D.C. with Spencer Clavin and Paul Vanderklay. Yeah. And Paul, he's a Calvinist pastor, and he always talks about the church, right? He loves the church.
Yeah.
But I know, and I don't think he would argue with me, that when he says the church, he means something very different from
the mystical body. The mystical body. Yeah, right. I agree.
Say the church. I mean, and
where two or more gathered in my name.
That's the church. Yeah. So and I think I think there has been untold damage throughout history from people associating the church with the bureaucrats running things.
Oh, horribly. Right. I know every bureaucrat would admit that much too. Remember, again, for Illich, he would say the church is that entity that takes its nourishment from the Eucharist. That's a very mystical notion.
That idea.
It's great.
But I think bureaucracy often trumps that.
It does.
Yeah. And that's the problem. And that's what I thought, part of what really pissed me off over the past 4 years when the bishop said, okay, we're going to lift the Sunday obligation because we can. And then they said, okay, we'll put it back in now. I'm like, what do you mean? This is kind of
Putting it back on was so funny. It was just like,
come on,
they
who
all
are
had
you?
to be looking at their calendar saying, okay, the
Oh,
obligations
look,
are just so funny.
that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So why, you know, so why don't you, we were talking
Well,
about
I was
divorce.
actually, go ahead, sorry.
A woman I know, her husband left, or I don't know if he left her, but he was Chinese, but Catholic, and he had mistresses all over the place.
Oh, wow.
And she left him, but because they were married in the church, and this has been over 50 years later, she has never remarried. So she's a good Catholic who won't remarry because of that. But she was condemned to a life of isolation because of a protocol.
I mean,
Right.
when
But that's on
COVID
her.
started,
That's on her, though, isn't it? You know, she could file for the annulment. They're now free in every diocese.
But they wouldn't give her. No, they
okay.
don't do it,
That's
right?
very important. That's very
They
important.
give annulments, you know.
are they easy to get? I wasn't
They
aware
are
of this
now.
principle.
Pope Francis. He made it really, in one sense, easy. You know, it's
But
yeah. I'm not saying all
but-
this is like so clear.
It
It's a whole
certainly
different
wasn't-
conversation. Yeah.
right?
But even when COVID began, I was still in like I was very deep in my Orthodox inquiry phase, and I was talking to, you know, I was starting to go to an Antioch church and stuff like that, and my little girl at the time, who was like almost 6, she loved the music. She goes, and she asked to go after when COVID shut things down. She's like, Mom, can we go back and listen to where the God music is? She loved that. But I literally was in the beginnings of like just beginning the inquiry stuff and talking to the pastors and stuff there, and then things shut down. And they basically completely said go listen to Ancient Faith Radio, and that's all that I got. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like, you know, so
Oh yeah,
they dropped the ball in such a big way.
Of envelopes. Yeah.
You know, like I had been studying Orthodoxy for almost 2 years. I was like ready. I was like really chopping the bit. I'm just going to do this thing, and then all of a sudden it's evaporating. I think, I guess that's not my place. Okay, good to know. God
That's
will
a
take me
great
someplace
story,
else.
Lindsay. It evaporated.
All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up.
This has been great. Yeah.
By the way, look at that regeneration
I
swag.
wish I have one. I have a mug.
Swag.
Yeah.
So, by the way, we do have a Patreon now, so it's going to be in the box below. And I think Mike's going to link my article on Christian Romanticism. So, and here's the thing.
Lindsay, do you have a website or anything? Can you send me any links to your
I don't
things?
have anything right now. I mean, I am currently trying to build out basically a collection of metaphysical fairy tales for kids, and that's kind of what a fairy tales is going to be. And hopefully I'll do an illustration or two here and there. But it's just been as you know, summer gets away from you, so it's still forthcoming. But that is the intention. But if they want to see my work, I will be in Jesus the Imagination in the new.
That's great.
In the new edition coming out.
Yeah.
And please, ladies and gentlemen, comment, subscribe, let us know what you think. We love to come.
Michael, I told you I had a friend of the podcast and a friend of yours, Scott Martin, and his wife, Anessa. They were coming from Michigan over to the St. Catherine Shrine and the North American Martyr Shrine. Then they got off Thruway I-90, kind of came through some of the Finger Lakes and showed up in center of the world, Axis Mundi, Hemlock, New York, and we had a really great afternoon. Yeah. Scott knows his plants and trees and his ecology like nobody, man.
That's right. And Scott actually used to be in our CSA, and he was not far away at all.
Scott, you left one of the T's in your first name in my yard. Scott spells his name S-C-O-T.
Yeah, I know. He yelled at me because I put it in Jesus' Imagination with 2 T's once and never lived it down.
That's great. Well,
it's not my fault.
But thank you, everybody, for listening to the Regeneration Podcast. Lindsay, I don't know too many things, and I can't read the future, but the future certainly has you on the Regeneration Podcast many more times.
I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love to. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next week or thereabouts.